We're wrapping up this week 5 of this little series we're calling B.L.E.S.S, 5 missional practices that all of us can do every single day. None of these are super hard, but it's something we can do, and they'll open doors to a blessing to the people around us. We've been borrowing from this acronym from the book entitled B.L.E.S.S. B is begin with prayer. We talked about that 5 weeks ago. Pray for opportunities, pray for God to open doors, pray for you to be a blessing. It's really simple. L is listen to people, actively listen. It's amazing when we stop thinking about what we're going to say and actually listen to what they are saying, whoever we're talking to, it opens up all kinds of doors for us to know how God can bless them. E is eat, which is invite people to your home. You can go meet them in restaurants, go to their home, wherever, it doesn't matter where. Go eat, drink coffee together, it doesn't really matter. But you get together, you're living life together, you have conversation, and it opens up the door to blessing as well. Last week, Tom talked about serve. You find a need, you fill it, you humble yourself to become available to those around you. And then today, we're going to end with S, share your story. And I kind of go back and forth. I battle myself on the terminology of this. I'd say really it's sharing God's story. It's just how his story intersects with yours, right? So it's your story, it's your life, but it's how God comes into it and changes it. And we'll talk about that today. In 1 Peter chapter 3, Peter says, in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and reverence, keeping a clear conscience, so that when you are accused, those who disparage you, your good conduct in Christ will be put to shame. Now, I have a lot of buddies that are type A personalities, and when they teach this thing, it's almost kind of intimidating, right? They intimidate us into thinking, this is about the apologetics of the faith. You need to have like the whole Bible memorized, and you need to be able to, by memory, tell every prophecy that Jesus fulfilled and what time of day he did it and what verse it goes back to and where it was fulfilled and all this stuff that you're supposed to remember. You should be able to parse Greek and debate anybody and any time, even the Greek words like their fourth meanings. They always give various meanings. You should know all of them and how it could be used in every text and be able to explain every mystery of the Bible at any moment, at any time. And that can be a little intimidating. Gosh, I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm like, well, I can't do half that stuff. I'm not the debater, right? I'm a conversation guy. Well, and so that can be an intimidating verse. Some people can do it really well. Most of us really can't. We're just not fighters when it comes to Scripture. And all this is saying, I think, in the Scripture, is that you put Christ as Lord of your life, right? You've declared him as Lord in your life and in your heart. You have acknowledged him as holy, as the Holy Son of God. You're living your life in such a way as Jesus is Lord and he is the Son of God. You should be able to say what you want there, because not everyone's going to agree with you. It's going to be an out, what you say, what you do, your life will be an overflow of that decision that he is Lord. He is holy. And there's going to be some people who will push back against that when you do that. Some people will think you're weak if you believe in God. Some people will think maybe you take your faith too seriously. Maybe you've had relatives like, you guys are just way too religious. Like, just slow down, right? Or they may think your faith is ridiculous. There's certainly people out there who think that. And really, I think all Peter's saying here is be able to tell them why you believe. You don't have to argue them to the faith. I don't think that's what Peter's saying here. Just tell them why. Be able to have a defense for what you're saying. And the best answer for that generally comes from your personal story. Well, I was headed for divorce court, and God saved my marriage. Of course he's real, right? Or I had a rare form of cancer, but God healed me. I was a drug addict, an alcoholic, but I've been clean for years now. I put my faith in Jesus. He completely changed my life for the better. People can't argue with that. Now, they can argue verses, they can argue different things, but they can't argue your story, because it's your story. Jesus, one time, he's walking by a blind man, and it was common at the time of Jesus that if someone was blind or had any type of issue like that people thought, well, obviously there's sin in the person's life. And so the disciples asked Jesus, well, what sin? Who sinned here, him or his parents? He was actually born blind, so he'd never seen ever in his life. And they asked Jesus, well, did his parents sin? And that's why he's born this way? Or did he sin? And I guess, it's a good question for the culture at that time. And Jesus responds, he says, well, neither. He didn't, it wasn't him, and it wasn't his parents. He was born this way so that God might show his glory through him. And they're like, what? What are you talking about that? And at that, he leans over, he spits on the ground, He takes some the dirt and makes mud from his spit, puts it on the guy's eyes, and tells him, now go clean yourself off. Which is kind of a weird request. And he does it, and when he obeyed, his eyes were opened for the first time in his life. He could see. Crazy miracle. Amazing thing happened there. Now, the religious leaders were not happy about that. They called a man in to investigate what in the world happened to this guy. How come you can suddenly see? You were born blind, and now you can suddenly see. And the man tells them, well, it was Jesus. Jesus healed me of blindness. That's kind of like in our culture, we have two major political parties. You tell one political party that the other political party did something really good that's being effective, and they're going to go against it. It doesn't matter. Even if it really is good, they're going to hate it. They'll deny it that it's good. Both parties do that, right? That's kind of what's going to go on here with the religious leaders here. They don't like Jesus. They hate Jesus. They don't want to be able to say, oh, that's a good thing. Great, that's a great miracle, Jesus. So they're looking for a way to like shoot him down. They want to discredit anything Jesus has done. And so they start pushing back on this freshly healed man, and they say, we need you to testify that Jesus is a sinner. Right, we're trying to get something against him. We're trying to bring this guy down, and you're saying he's healed. I need you to say he's a sinner. And John 9:25, this is his answer. He answered, whether he's a sinner, whether or not he's a sinner, I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see. That's this guy telling his story and lifting up Jesus. I don't know everything about Jesus. I don't have all the answers. I haven't read the whole Bible or studied the whole Bible or read every Greek word or all the different things, right? But let me tell you what he did in my life. Let me tell you how he's changed me. That's what this man did right here. The Pharisees are highly educated intellectuals. They could argue and debate anyone and do circles around him, make him look silly, especially a common, ordinary man like this guy probably was. But they couldn't argue with what he said. I was blind, and now I see. You can't fight that. I mean, you have, in your private moment, you have to admit, man, he's right. He was blind. I knew him before, and he clearly can see. What do I do with that? It's a great way to open up the door of the gospel. There's three parts to sharing your story that every single one of us have. These three parts. Our story is going to be different. It's going to look different. It's going to sound different. But we all have these three parts. So my three parts are here: my life before Jesus, how I met Jesus, and my life after Jesus. That's really what this man said right here. This man who had been blind, he used that exact same pattern. Well, before Jesus, I was blind. I couldn't see. And then I met Jesus, and he put mud in my eyes, told me to clean myself, and I obeyed myself. Everything changed. My life after Jesus is now I can see. Extremely simple. You don't need to have big long paragraphs or pamphlets or I got to remember the right order. It's just your story. I was blind. Jesus healed me. Now I can see. What's your story? My story, to be honest, is pretty boring. I'm not going to get into the details. Many of you heard them before, but it's fairly boring. I had my big sins because I was a kid before meeting Jesus. Well, I used vulgar language, and there was some vandalism that I probably have never told you about, and shoplifting, and those aren't like minor, but they're honestly compared to stories out there, they're not big on the scale, right? I mean, it's not. It's kind of a boring story. It's nothing that I'm proud of, but certainly nobody's chasing after me to write a movie about my adventures of third grade, stealing a candle from the Ben Franklin. I mean, okay, it was a kid, right? So people kind of pass that, but that's my story. That's my story. I met Jesus through my mom, through an incredibly loving Sunday school teacher, and other influences, and the lights came on one day. And then I obeyed Jesus, and he completely changed the trajectory of my life. I am convinced the pattern I was going on, I probably would have been in jail, at least at some point, right? I mean, I just kept going. I kept going bigger, you know how it is. And then I finally, I just cut it off, and I stopped. So the whole trajectory of my life changed. And even by fourth grade, it was such a radical change in my life that I was like, I just felt this distinct call that I'm going to grow up and be a pastor. I'm going to grow up and be a preacher. I can't explain it. I just knew it. So there was a big change for me. Now, you can argue with me all day about a lot of things. You can debate social issues, creation versus evolution, right or wrong about abortion, gay marriage or not, all the different things like that. You can call my faith a crutch. You can say it's a weakness, that I'm simply a weak person, so I need a God in my life, a make-believe God. They can argue that, but you can't argue what God has done in my life. I don't care how intellectual you are or how far on the atheist scale you climb, you can't argue what God has done in my life and how he has been absolutely faithful in my life for 50 years. I mean, I could tell you, we could spend all day talking stories of how God has just showed up over and over and over and over again. You can't argue with that. Now from there, we can have discussions about Scripture, but I'm just saying you can't argue your story. Can't do it. Everybody in this room has a story. Some of you have been radically changed by Jesus. Some stories include past mistakes that would make a boring person like mine hair curl, and some of you are like me. Maybe you were raised in the church as a young person, you accepted Christ, and your stories include being saved from things that would lead to making huge, costly mistakes. I accepted Christ long enough that, like I say, okay, my story, I tried to make it sound exciting, but it's really not. It's pretty boring. I sailed through middle school, high school, college without experimenting with all the things all my friends were doing. I've never taken a drug in my life. I wouldn't know it if I saw it. Never even taken a puff on a cigarette. I mean, I did about 6 months of drinking and thought, hey, I'm either going to really go into this or I'm going to get out, so I just got out. And when I was young enough to make that decision, I tend to be addictive in everything I do, so I just cut the thing off. Never experimented with all the stuff. I never was intimate with anyone before marriage. I mean, all that stuff, pretty boring to a lot of people. That doesn't make me any better or worse than anybody. It just means that I'm been able to enjoy the blessings of God because I never felt like I was cheated. The whole time I was enjoying the blessings of God through that whole growing up years, longer than a lot of people get to do it. That's my story, right? You can't argue with that. You have a different story, and somewhere in there God intersected with your life, but you have a story. So I've been geeking out on somehow, I don't even know how I did this. Well, actually, I do know. In our men's breakfasts, we've been doing a video of Lee Strobel, and I forget the other guy's name all of a sudden, but two guys. Lee Strobel was an atheist, working in the Chicago Tribune, investigative reporter, like in the 80s. And he decided he was going to prove Christianity wrong, and he did this deep dive. So he's an analytical thinking law, degree, I believe he has as well, in journalism as well. And so he went in to prove Christ wrong and the resurrection wrong and all the things. And the more he dug and the more he got the evidence, he looked at it and he said, I can't, this is right. And he became a Christian. And so he's been a pretty famous guy the last several decades, writing books and being preachers and doing all the things. So he's writing books. Anyway, he's done some interviews. He wrote a book recently that's come out this year. And he's doing interviews because of that. His recent book is Seeing the Supernatural, and that's why he's showing up in all these podcasts. Well, I've seen one, so now they're popping up on my YouTube feed like, hey, you need to see this one too, and this one too. So I've been watching these videos of him telling story after story after story of supernatural things, of God just interacting with the world. Because, again, he's coming at it from like a scientific type of approach. He's not like me going, well, of course I believe, because I believe God can do whatever he wants. That's one of my favorite things to say. God does what he wants. And I believe that's without exception. I mean, he just does what he wants. He breaks all the laws because he wrote them, right? But he comes in and gets the evidence that, did he really? Did that happen? Or let's find out what really happened there. So he's been doing that. So he wrote a book recently, Seeing the Supernatural. So I've been watching these interviews. I mean, I was up like 3 a.m. this past week, probably a couple of times, just watching them because I can't turn it off. It's like one story after story after story. And it's just fascinating to me because I get excited and all geeked out about this. One of the stories I heard this week, it just stuck with me, and I finally last night I thought, I'm going to put this is like so cute, like I'm going to talk about this. It's such a cool story. I don't know how I've never heard this because it actually goes back to the 80s where he investigated it. But one of the stories was about a woman named Barbara Snyder. And as I dug into it a little more, discovered it's actually from a different book he wrote earlier, The Case for Miracles. He did The Case for Christ, very famous book. So a lot of his books are The Case for, so he did The Case for Miracles. And this story is in that book, I understand. So here's the story. Barbara was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic, probably in the 70s, actually, when this diagnosis happened, with an aggressive form of multiple sclerosis. She was a teenager. It was aggressive. It got worse very quickly, rapidly. I mean, it just took over her body. She had multiple hospitalizations. She became bedridden pretty much, became so bad the doctors and her parents had a conversation. They said, next time she has pneumonia, was common, we're just going to let her go because we're just putting her through so much, trying to keep her going. And this is ultimately, it's going to claim her. And so they decide that that's what's going to do next time she hits pneumonia. Let her die peacefully. She hadn't walked in 7 years. Her muscles had withered away. Her fingers were curled up like a pretzel, actually touching her wrists. You know, I can't even make my hand do that because it had taken over her. Her feet were so damaged she couldn't stand if she wanted to. Her diaphragm was paralyzed. One lung was collapsed. The other was half working. She had a tube in her throat to feed her oxygen as well as nutrients. She no longer was able to control her bladder and bowels and lost her eyesight, so all she could see now was gray shapes. She's in hospice, trying to keep comfortable. And one of her friends said, man, we're going to call the local Christian radio station and just tell them, would you pray for our friend Barbara, she's dying, and just pray for her. So they called, it's in Chicago, they called the local radio station and they put the word out. And they know at least 450 people were praying for her because 450 people sent or mailed in a card or a letter just saying, what you know, Barbara, we're praying for you, blah, 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 encourage her and the whole thing. Probably many more than that prayed. I prayed for a lot of people I've heard on the radio that I've never wrote a letter to. So I'm sure you can multiply that number who were actually praying for her. Well, it's Pentecost Sunday, 1981. She's in her bedroom in hospice. They're preparing her for death. On her deathbed, her aunt and two of her friends, probably one of them who made the phone call to the radio station, they're in her room and they're reading to her the letters that people had been sending to her and trying to encourage her. And suddenly, in the corner of the room, a corner that nobody was at, she hears a voice. It says, my child, get up and walk. Now, she hadn't walked in 7 years. She pulls the tube out of her throat. And she says to her friends, I don't know what you're going to think of this, but God told me to get up and walk. Go find my parents. I don't want them to be here. They took off running to get their parents wherever they are in the house. But she couldn't wait. She jumps out of bed, begins walking. Her feet hit flat on the ground for the first time in years. Her hands, she said, opened up like flowers. And suddenly she had use of her hands. She realized that she could see clearly, something she hadn't done for quite some time. She was completely, instantaneously healed of MS. Now again, this isn't like someone's story, like maybe they really didn't have it. This is well documented. It's with the Mayo Clinic. It's with several hospitals, multiple doctors. You would have a whole series of people and tests and records on this. And at least Strobel did this deep dive and talked to the doctors and all this stuff. This is a true documented story. Her mother comes running into the room. She falls on her knees and grabs Barbara's calves and said, your muscle tone has come back. Like, what? What in the world? And Barbara's dancing around the house with her dad. They're praising God. It's a Sunday, so they say, man, we better go to church. We got to thank God. We got to praise God for what he's done. They're sitting in the back of the church, and the pastor says, hey, does anybody have any announcements? Yeah. So Barbara comes walking down the aisle, and people start freaking out because they know her. They've not seen her out of a wheelchair for over 7 years. And they're freaking out, and they spontaneously start singing, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, and now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Imagine that church service. She goes to the doctor the next day, and later the doctor admitted to leave because I saw her walking down the hallway toward my office. I assumed she had died, and I was just seeing her ghost. And then I actually met with her, and he stated the obvious. Her story is medically impossible. She went on to marry a pastor, lived a perfectly healthy life, actually for decades, and it was just a couple, 3 months ago that she passed away. A very healthy, older person. Do you think she had trouble sharing that story? Do you think she ever thought, oh, I shouldn't, Oh, I don't want to embarrass anyone. I don't want to force my Jesus on anybody. I kind of doubt it. Do you think as through the decades of her in ministry with her husband, do you think as they met with people who had ailments and sicknesses and cancers and all the things that our bodies, have, do you think she had a message of hope for them? Not necessarily, God's not going to do that to everybody. Obviously, we know he doesn't. We just had a funeral yesterday, right? It doesn't happen to everybody. But what a story to say, God's got you. God's got you. I think so. Do you think anybody, I don't care what a debater or a great arguer or theologian or intellectual person you are, do you think anyone could ever talk her out of her faith? No. She lived 7 years of MS and then jumped out of bed. Her story's pretty crazy. Everybody in this room has a story to tell. It may not be incredible. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. I probably would have heard it by now. My story's not that exciting, right? It may not even be as boring as mine, but it is a story of God moving in your life. And it's your story. It's a story that God has given you. It's a story of an amazing God who created the universe and died for you and forgave your sin. And you have that story. The story of your life before Jesus, whatever that looked like, a story of how you met Jesus, and the story of what your life has looked like ever since. Are you perfect? No. But you're working your way in Jesus. I like the way Mary Magdalene in the television series The Chosen puts it. Maybe you've seen that. I think it was season 1, where she said, I was one way, maybe it was season 2, I don't remember. I was one way, and now I'm a completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. It's our story. Here's your assignment for the week. I honestly encourage you to spend some time jotting this down. There's outlines and has a space for it. You can just do a napkin. It doesn't matter where you write this. But just answer those questions. What was my life like before Jesus? We all have a story. It could be completely wild, doing all kinds of stuff, or it could be, well, I grew up in the church. Well, then what was your life like before you really seriously jumped in and made Jesus Lord? Not just this guy that you see on the flannel board, but that your parents talk about, but became your Lord. What was that life like? And 2, how did I meet Jesus? What made you take that step? What moment was it? This past week I threw on our Facebook, go, hey, was there a song that hit you? Actually I saw someone else post that somewhere. I thought, that's kind of a cool question. And it's like, was there some song that hit you and said, yes? Or was it a person? Or was it a situation? Something that happened that jolted you into a serious where now you set Christ as Lord and holy, as Peter said. What was that? How'd that happen? And number 3, what's your life been like since you met Jesus? How has he blessed you? How have you blessed others? How has he changed your life? How has he saved you from making big mistakes or saved you because you did make a big mistake? Whatever it is, how did he help you in your life? When you think that through ahead of time, what that does, it gets you comfortable with your own story, because sometimes we shove that stuff aside or pretend it's not real or downplay it or whatever. You got to put it in the forefront. Think it through. It gives you more confidence, more peace so that you can share your story, because your story is going to be a blessing to someone. Your story is something, exactly the story that someone else needs to hear. You're not out selling anything. You're not trying to impress anyone. You don't get too crazy on the gory details. Oh, this is what I did. You just simply let people know how God has gone into your life, how he saved you, and how he can save them. It is your story connected with the gospel that compels people to make the same decision you did. And that's the greatest blessing that we could possibly give anyone on this planet.